Golden horizons rise where silence meets the breath of dawn, and the letter G becomes the gate through which dreams enter the desert, carrying with them the fragrance of longing and the whisper of eternity. And from that gate the poet steps barefoot upon the sands, his heart trembling with visions of love that do not die, his soul echoing with verses that have no end. Gentle winds sweep the dunes like hands brushing the hair of a beloved, and in those winds I hear a music older than time, the soft pulse of a falcon's wing, the distant cry of a camel caravan, the rhythm of hooves that remember journeys from one horizon to another. Grains of sand glitter like stars fallen to earth, and as I touch them they burn with stories of lovers who once walked here, of warriors whose honor was carved into the silence, of poets who left their words behind like footprints waiting for me to follow. Gazing into that vast expanse, I feel the presence of one who is more than a dream, a name carried in every echo, a love that does not bow to distance, a flame that survives even the coldest night. Gathering courage from the stillness, I lift my voice and it becomes a river, flowing across the dunes, weaving through the palm groves, and rising like prayer into the sky, where God listens to hearts more than to words, to intentions more than to actions, to love more than to ritual. Greatness is not in power, but in the ability to kneel before love, and I kneel willingly, not before a throne, but before the memory of her eyes, before the endless sky where her smile still glows, before the promise that even if the world is dust, love will remain immortal. Glorious are the nights when the moon sits like a pearl upon the black silk of heaven, when the stars become companions and each constellation shapes itself into her face, her presence woven into Orion's belt, her laughter hidden in the Pleiades, her grace stretching across the Milky Way. Grief melts in such nights because love outshines sorrow, because the universe itself conspires to remind me that she is not gone. She is the air, the light, the very heartbeat that keeps me alive. Gentle is the desert at twilight, when shadows lengthen like verses, when camels kneel and rest after long roads, when the falcons tuck their wings, and yet my heart does not rest. My soul does not fold itself away, because within me burns an endless flame, unquenchable, unbroken. Gazelles move gracefully across the horizon, each step a poem, each glance a line of scripture, and I follow them not with my eyes but with my heart, because they remind me of her gentleness, of the way her spirit moved like light across my life. Giving myself to this endless journey, I wander deeper into the desert, and every dune I cross becomes another stanza. Every horizon I reach another chapter. And I know that this poem will never end, because love itself has no ending. Great rivers eventually meet the sea, but my longing flows into the infinite. In the vast silence of the golden desert where the winds sing their eternal hymns and the dunes glow beneath the embrace of the sun, the voice of a poet rises like a falcon soaring into the endless blue. It is the voice of Fazza, the son of the desert, the writer of dreams, whose heart is bound not by walls of stone, but by the breath of the wild sands and the pulse of love that flows eternal. He walks where camels tread, where the hooves of stallions beat the earth like drums of destiny, and where the stars lean closer to listen to his words. His poetry is not ink upon parchment, it is fire upon the air, it is the whisper of the sea, it is the timeless echo of longing and devotion, of courage and of tenderness, of heritage and of the quiet yearning for one beloved face that outshines even the moon. The desert knows his steps as if carved upon its skin, for every grain of sand remembers the weight of his journey. He speaks to the dunes as if they were old friends, and they bend their ridges in reply, shaping themselves into echoes of his lines. Each verse is born not from thought alone but from the marrow of his soul, for Fazza writes with a pen carved from the wing of a falcon and dipped in the ink of memory. The wind carries his words across the horizon, from Dubai's towers that glisten like mirages of glass, to the farthest reaches of the Bedouin tents where the old gather and smile, remembering that poetry is the blood of their people. In his voice, they hear the past, the falconers, the riders, the tribes who crossed barren lands with nothing but faith. In his voice, they hear the present, a crown of progress resting lightly on the brows of tradition. And in his voice, they hear the future, a vision soaring higher than the tallest minaret. Love, too, breathes in his lines. For no poet walks untouched by love's fire, and Fazza carries it like a torch in the night, guiding him through the shadows of solitude. The beloved in his poetry is not bound by name alone. She is a spirit. She is a muse. She is the reflection of every heart that has ever longed, the answer to every prayer whispered in silence. When he writes of her eyes, he writes of the ocean, unending and merciful. When he writes of her hair, he writes of the night sky where every strand glimmers like a hidden constellation. When he writes of her presence, he writes of rain falling upon the desert, a miracle that awakens every sleeping seed within him. The beloved is both real and eternal, a truth and a dream, a face remembered by his soul before his birth and sought after in every line he composes. And so his poetry flows, not as a river that begins and ends, but as the sea that forever returns to itself. He speaks of loyalty, the unbroken bond between man and land, between rider and steed, between falconer and falcon, between lover and beloved. For loyalty is the pulse of the desert, and without it the dunes would scatter into nothing.